if I give somebody the most perfect supplement products that addresses all of their needs, if their breathing is dysfunctional, and which means their nervous system is dysfunctional, they're going to use those nutrients differently when they're in a fight or flight state versus in a rest and repair state.
You're listening to the What the Gut podcast, where busy moms can come for a holistic approach to health and vitality. I'm Allison, your host, a holistic health and wellness coach. In this space, we'll dive into the intricacies of achieving holistic wellness while balancing the demands of daily life as a busy mom. What the Gut is your haven for navigating the challenges that come with juggling numerous tasks while aiming for a healthier, more balanced life. Join me as we uncover practical solutions to common health hurdles, from managing fatigue to understanding all things gut health. Through insightful discussions, actionable insights, and tailored lifestyle strategies, my goal here is to empower you to embrace a vibrant, nourishing life while saying goodbye to being overwhelmed and exhausted. So if you're ready to embark on this transformative journey towards holistic well-being, hit that subscribe button. Get ready to discover the secrets to thriving in motherhood while nurturing your overall wellness. A quick reminder, everything discussed here is for educational and empowering purposes only and is not intended for personalized medical advice. Consult your personal healthcare provider for personalized medical advice. Welcome to What the Gut, where we create our own path to holistic health, one episode at a time. Today on What the Gut, I have Sachin Patel. He is a father, a husband, a philanthropist, and a functional medicine practice success coach, speaker, author, breathwork facilitator, and plant medicine advocate. Sachin is convinced that the doctor of the future is the patient, and he has committed himself to helping others raise their consciousness, activate their inner doctor, and initiate their deepest healing through the use of lifestyle and breathwork. Sachin founded the Living Proof Institute, through which he pioneered a revolutionary approach to patient-centered healthcare. Sachin coaches hundreds of practitioners around the world so that they are empowered to deliver affordable and inspired care to their communities through his Perfect Practice mentorship program. He's an advocate of transforming the healthcare paradigm, and he has devoted his life to the betterment of health for both patients and practitioners. Please join me in welcoming Sachin Patel. Welcome to the podcast today. It is so fun to have you here. Your simplicity towards breath work and how that affects health in general is just so fascinating to me. And I did get the pleasure of hearing you speak at ECO, and it was just an awesome experience overall. And breath work has been something that I know you are an expert in, and this is something that I've incorporated into my daily routine. Within the past year or so, I'm
Mhm.
fairly new at it, and I'm just amazed at the results that I've had from it. I would love for you to just tell me, and tell our listeners too, for those people who are not familiar with breath work, what is the connection between breathing and digestive health?
Wow. So great question. And thank you for sharing your experience. It's always wonderful to hear feedback and to know that the work is making a difference. Because sometimes I'm sure you feel like this, Allison. It feels like a thankless job. You just never know until people tell you how grateful they are. So I'm also grateful for this opportunity. So I would say that, you know, if you asked me this question 5 years ago, I don't think I would have been able to make this connection, but it's because of, me, I'm always seeking the path of least resistance. And when I say that, what I mean when I'm speaking is that I want to make it so simple that there's no resistance to learning the concept. And so that'll be my goal today, is to help people look at their breath in a new way so they can't unsee it, and in a way that they could explain it to other people so that the message propagates. And so that's kind of my mission in life, is to make complex ideas simple for people to grasp and then also explain to others. So the thing with breath and digestion is I believe it's really more about the parasympathetic nervous system. So, as many of your listeners may know, or they might be new to the concept of something called the autonomic nervous system, which is what essentially regulates all of our biological processes that we don't consciously control, and of course, those that we can consciously override. So things like digestion, enzyme production, saliva production, whether our pupils constrict or dilate, our skin regenerating, our digestive enzymes being produced, all of that's happening thanks to the autonomic nervous system. And we're grateful that it's doing all that thinking for us without coming to our conscious awareness. However, there's a bridge where you can tap into the unconscious functions in your body and tap into the autonomic nervous system. And that portal into the autonomic nervous system is the breath. So we can manipulate the breath. Pranayama is life force control. So essentially, when we say breath work, we're saying controlling the life force or controlling the breath. And so every breath we take, we get to decide consciously if we want to travel in a parasympathetic direction or if we want to travel in a sympathetic dominant direction. So, for example, if I wanted to prepare myself to run, I would want to increase my blood pressure, increase my heart rate. I could start hyperventilating and prepare my body for that process, right? Same thing, if I wanted to fall asleep, I could breathe a certain way to signal to my nervous system it's time for me to go into a state of rest. So, digestion being a rest and digest process, if we can find a way to activate that parasympathetic nervous system, then we can find a way to improve every function that's happening in the trunk, right? Because when we not just only have to digest our food, but we have to make enzymes
Mhm.
to break it down, and then we have to have an immune response to as food is entering into our body, as it's broken down into its little microscopic particles. And we also have to make sure that we're detoxing the toxins that are coming in. So, and then the fluids are being regulated, and the salt and electrolytes are being regulated. So every time we eat, our kidney, our liver, our digestive organs, they all have to become activated. And the only way you can do that is by increasing blood flow to them. And the only way we increase blood flow to our trunk organs is by actually slowing down our breath and going into a more parasympathetic state so that we're now using our autonomic nervous system and signaling it to send more blood to the digestive organs. And so that's the bridge between digestion and breath. But every healing process takes place on the parasympathetic side of the fence, which means that when you get people to not only, you wouldn't just do this, you wouldn't just do this activity or this behavior, or this breathing practice to improve digestion. The benefit that you would receive is every single system in your body that you're trying to heal would improve simultaneously, right? Because when we're parasympathetic, blood sugar handling improves, cognitive function improves, blood pressure improves, digestion improves, reproductive health improves, our blood sugar balance improves, blood flow improves, right? Every goal that we have, whether someone wants to get pregnant, whether they want to digest better, think better, sleep better, every goal that people have when they come to our practices, it lives on the parasympathetic side of the fence. So for many people, the breath is that portal into that autonomic nervous system that we can use to manually override. And what I want people to know, and maybe this is a good segue here, but the breath is like a two-way street, which means that if you pay attention to how your breath changes when your emotions change, then you would start to realize that our nervous system, unconscious to us, uses our breath, uses our diaphragm to actually act as a pharmacy. Your diaphragm, if you learn how to move your diaphragm in a certain way, at a certain pace, at a certain depth, you can actually start producing the chemistry of certain emotions. So, for example, if you just started laughing and you were just completely faking it, just the act of your diaphragm moving in that way would start changing the chemistry in your body. And within a few minutes, you would actually be laughing and feel happy.
So you can fake it until you make it.
You can. And really, your diaphragm is a powerful window into somebody's autonomic nervous system. So, for example, if you came up to me and I was breathing a certain way, right? I'm using an extreme example. You'd be like, dude, what's wrong with you? Right. So we can get into and tap into somebody's nervous system. Whereas if I'm sitting here and I'm breathing really slow and calm, you're going to know my nervous system is in a totally different state. right? So the way somebody's breathing is a window into their autonomic nervous system. So if you're a clinician listening to this, when a client comes into you, pay attention to how they're breathing, because what you will see is the dominant state of their autonomic nervous system. If their breath is calm and relaxed and it's unconscious to them, then that means their nervous system is calm and relaxed. But if their breaths are short, or if they're breathing through their mouth and you can tell they're short, shallow breathing, then chances are their nervous system is in a stress state. And if you're a clinician, that's a great opportunity for you to teach people how to do something like a physiologic sigh to shift their nervous system into a more parasympathetic state so they can actually hear what you have to say to them. Even if you're a patient, if you're going into a doctor's office or if you're going somewhere and you feel anxious or nervous or you're a little stressed out because maybe you were trying to beat traffic to get there or you're rushing to get there, then you can do a physiologic sigh, which I can demonstrate in a moment, to shift your nervous system and tell it that you're safe and to tell it that everything's okay. So one of the things that we do when we feel a sense of relief is we sigh, right? We don't even realize we're doing it. We just kind of do it unconsciously. So a physiologic sigh is where we're exaggerating that breath. And so we're manipulating the breath in such a way that we're trying to elicit that response. So we're just going to exaggerate for effect. And that's how you remember this exercise. It's really simple. We would simply place our tongue at the roof of our mouth, take a nice deep breath into the belly, further breathing into the lungs. And at the very top, we're going to breathe in a little bit more. We can even sip the air with our mouth if we want to, and just holding at the top, squeezing our pelvic floor. So just tightening up our pelvic floor. So our diaphragm is moving down, our pelvic floor is moving up. And then whenever you feel comfortable, you're just going to release it with a sigh on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Hey. You're going to drop your shoulders, let it all the way out, releasing as much as you can. And you repeat that 4 or 5 times, maybe even for a couple of minutes, depending on how much you need to shift. And you will find that within a few minutes, you are going to feel totally different. In fact, there's a study that was published. Andrew Huberman was one of the authors in the study. What they found was doing a cyclical physiologic sigh. So, doing what I just shared with you repeatedly for a few minutes was actually more effective than mindfulness meditation. So, this is a way that we can exaggerate, right? So, when we're doing mindfulness meditation, we're breathing neutral, right? Whereas with this, we're actually signaling, we're sending a message into the nervous system that it is already familiar with, right? When we feel a sense of relief, we naturally sigh. When we find something funny, we laugh, right? When we are upset, we cry, right? These are all breathing signatures. And so when we understand these breathing signatures, we can understand the state of somebody's nervous system. In fact, this also helps with communication because if I ask my wife a question, I don't pay attention to the words that she uses. I pay attention to how her breath changes,
Right.
right? Because then I know what her unconscious nervous system is saying. So then I know if I should keep having this conversation, if this is the right time to have this conversation or not. Same thing for our children, right? If we want to hold space for them and we want to be an anchor for them, then we need to slow down our breath, right? Because then, because of our entanglement with them, they will start breathing with us. So breath is a powerful tool in so many areas of our lives. It makes us more effective communicators. It allows us to have better cognition and memory. It allows us to be in the moment more. It allows us to change where blood is flowing in our body. It allows us to absorb traumatic experiences. So our lungs and our diaphragm are where we store grief and trauma. So a lot of times when people learn to breathe correctly, or if their breathing has become dysfunctional because of their traumatic experiences. See, the thing is like when somebody has a traumatic experience, if the trigger point develops in the diaphragm, it changes the way they breathe. And if it
Mhm.
changes the way they breathe, now it's changing the state of their nervous system. So if somebody has a lot of adhesions in their diaphragm, they're going to have short, shallow breathing. And if you didn't have any adhesions in the diaphragm and I made you short, shallow breathe, it would give you chronic low grade anxiety. So some people, because of their experiences, because what happens when we experience trauma is we actually hold our breath, right?
Yeah.
We brace for impact. So we actually hold our breath. And what maintains pressure when we're doing that is our diaphragm. So it physically takes the brunt force of us holding our breath and experiencing that trauma. And then as those trigger points develop over time, it kind of creates a patina on our diaphragm, if you will, where now it's changing the way we breathe, which then changes the state of our nervous system. So for some people, where they start to change their breath isn't by just changing the depth of their breath, but sometimes having people just dig a little bit underneath their rib cage and identifying if they have some trigger points in the diaphragm and releasing them can be a very powerful tool. And those adhesions are going to kind of bind up the digestive organs as well. So getting the diaphragm to move better creates more mobility in the trunk organs because as the diaphragm moves up and down, it's acting like a piston. So it's literally pumping the trunk organs. It's helping move lymph in those organs. It's helping with motility and circulation of blood and food. So all those things are being assisted in moving through the bowel because of the way we breathe. So somebody who becomes a short, shallow breather, for example, they're more likely to have constipation. And constipation is the most connected GI symptom to chronic stress. And guess what? When somebody has chronic stress, they have chronic short, shallow breathing. So
Yeah.
there's a mechanical way that the body assists us. There's a chemical way that the body assists us in functioning better through the breath.
I think the way that you explain that, very, very understandable and digestible, and I I love all of it. I
Mhm.
think for me, I'm the kind of person who has always been type A. I really wanna be productive and go, 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 and I had my own gut issues for years, and when I started working on my gut, and more so learning about breath work and how I am doing so much behind the scenes that I'm not aware of, like, I'm being so productive, getting all of these things in my body going and moving and just all the benefits that breath work has. To me, that was such a game changer to just be still, but knowing that I'm still doing so much.
Mhm.
And I know that whenever I saw you speak before, you told us this statistic that I thought was just so amazing. And that was that 70% of the detox occurs in our lungs. And to me, that was just amazing because I do have a background trained in Western medicine and functional medicine, and so a lot of the detox we learn is just kidneys, liver, but how you're talking about breath work and how it connects to moving everything in our diaphragm and our lungs and how we're detoxing things, to me, that was such a game changer.
Mhm.
So, I love that. I love that so much, and I'm sure
Thank you.
you could add a million more things to that to talk
Yeah,
about.
if I may, I think it's important. So when we're in a fight or flight state, there's a 80 to 90% decrease of blood flow to our trunk organs. So essentially, somebody who's in fight or flight perpetually, so a lot of people are in perpetual fight or flight, which
Mhm.
means that from the moment they wake up, it's go, go, go to the moment they go to sleep, and they don't fall asleep, they pass out. And there's a big difference. So these people are just really pushing themselves to the extreme. And as a result of that, it kind of really changes their physiology. And so when we're in fight or flight, that blood that we send to our arms and legs has to come from somewhere. And the body always prioritizes survival over repair and certainly over digestion and detox, right? So there's a hierarchy of priority. And so when we're on the go all the time, we're not sending blood flow to those organs and they go into a state of what I refer to as suspended animation. So they're not necrotic, so they're getting just enough blood flow so they can still, be your organs and not die on you, but they're not getting enough blood flow for them to function optimally.
Right.
So when people start shifting their nervous system, their detoxification becomes better as well. So even if somebody's taking, liver support or kidney support or GI support to detox, your detoxification system works better when you're in a parasympathetic state. And the other thing too to realize is we might urinate maybe a handful of times a day. So that's how the kidneys would help us detox. And we might defecate 1 to 3 times a day. That's how the bowel helps us detox. And that's where the liver detoxes and dumps its toxins into. But we're taking 23,000 breaths a day. And so that's where you'd want most of the detox to take place is somewhere where you can push it out, right? And this is why when somebody drinks, the body's pushing the alcohol out through the lungs. When somebody consumes certain toxins, you're gonna smell it on their breath, right? Because our body's trying to detox, but our body's also trying to detox CO2. So CO2 is a byproduct that's produced from mitochondrial respiration. And so it's a waste product along with water that the mitochondria produces that the body has to get rid of. And so that's another detoxification pathway. We want to eliminate that CO2 so that it doesn't continue to build up in our body and create a toxic situation.
Yeah. I love all of that. I love all of it. I could listen to you talk about this all day. I did wanna ask you, so there was something else that you said when I heard you speak before, and that was that mouth breathing is, like, the number one cause of cavities. And I remember you talking about whenever you really started working on your breath and how it changed your facial structure, and just you also mentioned how thumb sucking had to do with certain types of narrowing of the airway. M I guess my question is, why is nasal breathing so important?
Yeah, great question. So when I was in chiropractic school, we did a full cadaver dissection. And so the last unit is head and neck anatomy. So we're literally dissecting actual cadavers, which they
Mhm.
don't do anymore in medical school. And they learn from prosections, which are professional dissections. But you really get a great appreciation of the human body when you dissect it. So I used to actually tutor head and neck anatomy. So I've seen a lot of, the internal workings of the face from a cross section up close. And so our nose is actually an organ that's specifically designed to perfect the air before it goes into our lungs. So for example, our immune system, people say that 70 to 80% of the immune system is in the gut, but our immune system actually starts in our nose. So our initial defenses against the outside world start in our nose, in our nasal cavity, and it's lined with a mucous membrane that produces nitric oxide. Nitric oxide kills pathogens, viruses, and bacteria on contact. So when we breathe air in through our nose, it slows down the air, interacts with the mucus, it pressurizes the air, temperature regulates the air, moisture regulates the air, cleans the particulate out of it, and essentially disinfects it before it goes into the lungs. Our mouth, on the other hand, is the dirtiest part of our body. So if you were to ask a microbiologist, what's the dirtiest part of the human body, they would say the mouth. And so we don't want to be breathing in if we can help it. When you're talking, sometimes it's challenging, or if you're obviously sprinting, you're going to want to breathe in and out through your mouth. But for the most part, if we can breathe in through our nose and out through our nose, then we are not going to dry out our saliva, which changes the oral microbiome. We're
Right.
not going to be inhaling the bacterial particulate into our lungs, which creates a chronic low grade load on our immune system and alters our lung microbiome, making us more susceptible to respiratory infections, which, hint, hint, right, was something that was going around here just recently.
Yeah.
And nobody talked about how to breathe, but how we breathe completely changes our immune defenses. In fact, to increase immune defenses, men were being given Viagra because it increases nitric oxide circulation. Well, you can do that by nasal breathing. In fact, nasal breathing increases nitric oxide production by sixfold. Humming increases nitric oxide levels by 15-fold. So, something as embarrassingly simple as humming can have a profound effect on your immune defense, but nitric oxide also helps increase circulation. So, it helps improve cognition and microcirculation to all of our tissues in our body. Our joints might have a lot of microcirculature in them, our brain, right? Our sexual organs. So we need proper circulation, which proper breathing also enhances. And because it dilates the blood vessels, it also decreases blood pressure. So
Yep.
by simply breathing correctly, you're having a ripple effect on so many different areas. And, try smelling without breathing through your nose, right? You know, try talking without breathing through your nose. So there's other auxiliary functions that breathing through our nose and benefits that our nose offers us.
Yeah. I love that. I did wanna ask, whenever I heard you speak before, just I think it was something about the connection with thumb sucking and using CPAPs and how that affects how we breathe.
Let's connect the dots. A lot of times it's connected. So a child who sucks their thumb, it, depending on, and it's not always the case, and I'm certainly not an expert in this area. I know when to refer out, right? So maybe I know enough to know what I don't know. But one of the things that you want to pay attention to is if a child has a hard time latching at birth to the breast, then that's a red flag, at least for me, that they may have a tongue tie. Another red flag could be that they suck their thumb.
Mhm.
And the reason they might suck their thumb or take a pacifier is because when there's a little magic button just behind our front two teeth, that when we push on it, it helps us feel relaxed. And so if you were to say the letter N and put where your tongue hits the roof of your mouth, that's that magic button. So children, because if they have a tongue tie, may not be able to get their tongue at the roof of their mouth, they will use their thumb as a spacer. And what that essentially does is it helps them feel calm instantly. You'll notice as soon as they put their thumb in their mouth, they're calm. And as soon as they take it out, they're not. And what that does is it pushes the palate upwards. When we push the palate upwards, now they have an indentation of a thumb in their hard palate, which should be, not flat, but it should have an arch in it, but not a U shaped arch. Okay. And what that does is now the face becomes more narrow and the airway becomes compromised because when we push that space up, we're making a smaller airway. And that can lead to a change in their bite. It can cause TMJ issues, but then it can also cause chronic low grade anxiety for people because when they try to breathe through their nose, the airway is so restricted physically that
Yeah.
it's much more comfortable for them to breathe through their mouth. But that further perpetuates their anxiety because if you were calm in breathing, you'd be breathing in and out through your nose with your tongue at the roof of your mouth. That's how you signal to your nervous system that you're safe and everything is okay. But if you're breathing with your mouth open, tongue at the bottom of your mouth, now what happens is your tongue is not positioned correctly, which means there's nothing pushing your palate outward. So your tongue actually, when positioned correctly, acts like a spacer, right? It pushes your face outwards and forwards so your dental arch can form correctly. But if you have a tongue tie, your tongue is going to be in the bottom of your mouth. And so therefore it's going to lead to potential overcrowding of the upper jaw. And what ends up happening, or the upper bite. And so what ends up happening is people end up getting their teeth removed because the
Mm.
dentist might say that there's crowding, we need to remove teeth, instead of getting their jaw expanded. And
Yeah.
so my son went through this. We went to three dentists before we found one who was more airway focused. And all three of them said we need to pull his teeth. Otherwise, his adult teeth aren't going to come in. And I said, that sounds pretty stupid and barbaric at the same time. Like, there's got to be a better solution. The
Right.
thing is like, you have to understand what your practitioner's end game is,
Mhm.
right? So if your dentist's end game is you're going to have a pearly white smile and your teeth are going to be perfectly straight, that's a different end game than you're going to have a nice open broad arch and a beautiful airway that allows you to breathe restriction free for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
Which one do you actually want, right?
Right.
You probably want the second one, but if it's not your doctor's end game, then you're both kind of, you know, both have different visions. So you want to find an airway focused dentist if you have young children, like we did, because they're going to focus on the airway along with the teeth, not just myopically focus on the teeth. So my son wore an expander for a couple of years, and all of his teeth came in nice and beautiful. He overexpanded, which is kind of what you want, and then now all of his teeth are going to come in, and then he'll have braces to straighten everything out. So he's going to have a nice, beautiful, broad smile. He used to complain about having a hard time breathing through his nose, and it was because he had such a small upper airway, and now he doesn't have that issue anymore. So, that's like probably one of the best gifts we've given him in terms of his health is a nice
Yeah.
open airway. And so parents, I mean, that's something for all of you to pay
Yeah.
attention to is how is your child breathing? Because, there's implications of this. So about 30% of behavioral disorders are directly correlated and linked to dysfunctional breathing, especially at nighttime.
Mhm.
So, how our children breathe at night sets the tone for their nervous system when they wake up in the morning, right? So, if they slept and they were breathing through their mouth all night, they're waking up in a fight or flight state. They're already at a disadvantage when it comes to their mood and their energy levels. But if they were breathing through their nose all night, then they're not dehydrated because breathing through your mouth dehydrates you.
Yeah.
They're well rested. They've had better blood flow to their brain all night, and they've also used less energy to breathe. Their mouth isn't dry, so they've preserved their oral microbiome. I mean, they're just waking up with so many advantages versus somebody who's been mouth breathing all night. And this applies to both, men, women, children, and adults. About 66% of people sleep with their mouth open at night. So, statistically, that's 2 out of 3 people. And I know my entire family mouth tapes at night. So we're part of that one third that doesn't sleep with their mouth open.
I think it is so fascinating, and I had never heard a lot of this until I heard you speak, and I thought it made so much sense, and I have 3 children, and my middle child is, 7 years old, and I was telling her about this for some reason, and she was like, "Okay, so I need to tape my mouth," and she has started taping her mouth every now and then, we forget
Mhm.
sometimes, but I just think it's awesome because you're instilling these habits in them too that will lead to the just better health in the long run. So,
Mhm.
I think it is so fascinating.
Yeah.
I wanna I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, one thing I was gonna say, because people might be wondering, I just want to close a loop. They might be wondering, why is our jaw smaller and how does this lead to apnea? So if somebody has a small airway, then chances are they're going to be habitual mouth breathers. And because they're habitual mouth breathers, they're going to be much more likely to snore, which
Mhm.
means they're much more likely to have metabolic dysfunction, gain weight, which actually further perpetuates the snoring. And as a result of that, their breathing becomes dysfunctional
Mhm.
because of the way weight is distributed now, and also because their stress levels might be high. And then their breathing becomes, dysfunctional, especially at night. One of the main contributing factors to apnea is weight gain. And
Yep.
so, certainly, losing weight is going to be highly beneficial. Some people may or may not know this, but for every 10 pounds of body fat that we lose, 8.4 of it is through the lungs, because the
Yeah.
byproduct of mitochondrial energy production is carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is breathed out through our lungs. And so we lose about almost 85% of our weight through our lungs. And so getting
Fascinating.
people to breathe correctly will help them lose weight, but it will also cause them to have dysfunctional breathing if they gain weight. And so that's something to keep in mind. And then a lot of times people have weak diaphragms. So strengthening their diaphragms will help them become better breathers. And you can do that by simply laying on your stomach for 2 minutes and breathing into your belly. It's a really simple exercise. You can do it before you go to bed. You can do it when you wake up in the morning, or if you just need a break, you can lay on your stomach and breathe into your belly, or you can lay on your back and put a couple textbooks on your stomach and breathe into those, moving the textbooks up and down. That's going to help strengthen your diaphragm. Wearing a CPAP machine is generally trying to maintain a positive pressure. So it's a continuous positive pressure machine. That's essentially what it's doing. And you can actually breathe in certain ways that mimic that. So there's something called ujjayi breath or victory breath. It's a little bit hard to demonstrate. So I'm going to just have people Google it and find demos online. But victory breath is essentially taking a breath in and then you're almost fogging a mirror, but you're exhaling through your nose. So you're maintaining a positive pressure, and then what that you're slowing down the exhale, and you're almost like you're fogging a mirror, but you're exhaling through your nose is probably the best way to describe it. That type of breathing is CPAP breathing. So strengthening the diaphragm, doing ujjayi or victory breath, and then also losing weight. Those are going to be highly beneficial things that people can do. And then there's a series of tongue exercises and swallowing exercises that we have clients do that helps them improve their esophagus. Essentially, this is a muscular tube, right? And you have a lot of muscles that are holding things up. So mewing exercises can be beneficial, and certain types of swallowing exercises can be beneficial to kind of strengthen that muscular tube so it's not collapsing. And then, of course, sleep position. So if somebody's sleeping on their back and they're using a thick pillow, that's going to kink the airway, making it hard for them to breathe. So we would want them to sleep on their back, flat on their back, on with a pillow that puts their neck into a neutral position with a little bit of distraction. That's going to help improve their posture. It's going to open up the airway. Or for some people, if they need to, they can start by sleeping on their side, and that prevents the tongue from collapsing into the back of the throat. So those are some things that are worth noting when it comes to improving nighttime breathing. and the connection between our airways, especially forming as children, and apnea as adults.
Yes. It's so, so interesting to me.
Mhm.
I do want to ask you, I feel like you've touched on it a little bit, but how should we breathe?
Yeah, great question. So the answer is actually really simple, but it might not be what you expect. So you want to breathe based on the activity, right? So if I was going swimming, I'd want to breathe differently than if I'm checking my email, right? Or if I was going for a sprint, I'd be breathing differently if versus if I was going for a walk. So how we breathe is really based on, or the if we're going to actively control our breath, activate our pranayama, our life force, then we want to ask ourselves, what is the goal that I'm trying to accomplish? So if I'm sitting here checking emails, then, or I'm reading a book, or I'm watching television, or I'm having a conversation, or it's while you're talking and I'm listening, my breath goes to coherence breathing. That's kind of my default breathing. Coherence breathing is tongue placed gently at the roof of the mouth, breathing in and out through the nose for a count of 6 in and a count of 6 out. Coherence breathing has been shown to increase oxygenation of the brain. And so that allows us to have more clarity in our thinking. And it's called coherence breathing because it connects the heart and the brain. So if we can get into that state, I think our world becomes a better, brighter place. So that's the default breathing pattern I try to go into. Now, if I were to be going for a walk, the way I breathe when I go for a walk is my breath in is 6 steps and my breath out is 6 steps. So I inhale for 6 steps, exhale for 6 steps. Okay, so that's my breathing pattern there. And I'm trying to breathe in and out through my nose as much as I can. The second gear of breathing, so if I were to exert myself further or go faster, then I would breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth. Okay, so in through my nose and out through my mouth to remove that CO2 really quickly. And then the third gear of breathing, if I was to go into a sprint, right, then I would be breathing in and out through my mouth because I want to expand and contract my lungs as violently as I can. And I want to move my diaphragm up and down as fast as I can because that's helping my heart in pumping blood to my arms and legs. It's going to rapidly increase my blood pressure. So I want to take, shallow, short, intense breaths to help pump my heart and and that pumping of that pumping that increases the pressure is going to get more oxygen to the periphery. So it's going to allow me to, fuel my muscles as I'm running away from whatever's chasing me, or if I'm just doing some sprints, it's going to fuel the exercise process. So those are some things to keep in mind. Now, if somebody's trying to go to sleep, then I might have them breathe a little bit differently. There's something called a 4-7-8 breath, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and exhale for a count of 8. So, you can do that as well. And now some people don't like to count because they get anxious or it drives them crazy. But the rule of thumb, if you want to calm down, is just to lengthen your exhales. So it doesn't really matter. You don't have to be so scientific and rigid about it. You might breathe in for what feels like a count of 3 and exhale for what feels like longer than that. Okay. So we don't have to obsess over the numbers necessarily, but anything that we can do to lengthen our exhale, think of a sigh, right? That's a lengthened exhale. When you're humming, right? That's a lengthened exhale, right? So when we're breathing that way, we're usually feeling pretty calm. So for a lot of people, the physiologic sigh is another tool we talked about earlier where they can use that as a way to shift gears. If they want to go from feeling stressed to feeling calm, they can use the physiologic sigh, which is, three kind of a three-stage breath, holding, squeezing the pelvic floor, and then audibly exhaling. That's another great strategy for people to use. So what I've done is I've actually created a guide that goes into different scenarios. So if you're having an asthma attack, how you should breathe. If you're having a panic attack, how you should be breathing. If you want to fall asleep faster, how to breathe. So I'll share that with the audience if they're interested in having that, because that could be a great little tool for them to use for themselves if they want to start learning how to use their breath as a way to change the way they feel.
Yeah, for sure. That would be awesome. And it sounds to me like you really have to be in tune with your body and just pay so much more attention to yourself and your breath, which has its own benefits, right?
Hmm.
So that's it's just also fascinating to me. I do have a question. So I know I, ha- I have so many questions, but whenever we did a breathwork session with you at Eco, I remember feeling really great, but then I started feeling lightheaded. What does that mean? Does that mean I'm doing something wrong? Or was like, if somebody's doing breath work and then they start feeling this lightheadedness, should we stop or should we give into this?
Yeah, great question. So it just depends on where you want the breath to take you.
Okay.
And so for some people, they might experience something called tetany. And when they experience tetany, their hands and toes might start to feel really tight and start curling up. When we are breathing really rapidly and we're hyperventilating, we're changing the chemistry in our body. And so it's going to potentially help make us feel a little bit lightheaded because when you breathe really fast, you're actually getting less oxygen to the tissue. Breathing slower actually gets more oxygen to the tissue. So when you breathe fast through different breathing exercises that we went through, it's going to reduce the oxygen that's getting to the brain. So sometimes people are going to feel lightheaded. Now, if you're laying on your back, then you can push through that so that you don't fall over. So you can go a little bit deeper into the experience to kind of see where it takes you. So when you're in those type of states, you start getting into altered states. And as long as you're safe, like you're not going to fall, you're on the ground, then you can kind of explore to see where that takes you.
Interesting. Okay. I'll have to try that again because I was getting into that altered state and I was very fascinated by it, but it was also new. And so makes me a little bit nervous, right? So I love how you shared about your experience with your son and how breathwork has impacted his life. I'm curious with either your wife or you, what other personal experiences do you have, or how did you get into this exactly?
Yeah, so I think for me it was many things coming together, many aspects of my life, of my world colliding almost at the same time.
Yeah.
So one was that my son was having these dental hiccups, if you will. And so it turns out that it was his dysfunctional breathing and really my lack of awareness of breathing mechanics and not having that awareness. I didn't even know, right? So I was unconsciously incompetent in this area. And so when we started working with the dentist, that's when I started learning about James Nestor's work. So that kind of heightened my interest in understanding how breathing affects our facial structure. Now,
Mhm.
prior to that, I had experienced Wim Hof breathing, which allowed me to, do a cold plunge and hold my breath for an extended period of time. But it wasn't something that I really took on and adopted because I didn't really feel altered or shifted by it. It was cool, right? And it was fun, but I didn't really feel like shifted. But then fast forward a few years, I had an experience with my same Wim Hof guide, but he took me through a longer breathing session, about a 90-minute breathing session with a fully guided meditation, and that allowed me to heal some trauma and release some emotions I was holding on to and experience rebirth in so many different ways. And it was almost like an out of body plant medicine type of experience, but I got there using my breath. And so this is around the time, COVID was going around and everything was online. And so I learned a whole new tool and experience that I could offer my clients, but also the practitioners that I coach. And then I started just learning more and more. And I realized, why isn't anyone sharing this? Because when I started connecting the dots, I'm like, nobody explained this to me, and nobody's that I'm aware of is sharing this information. So I'm like, maybe it's supposed to be me. So then I just leaned into it and started educating practitioners. I started educating my followers online. And it really started taking off, opening up doors for me. And what I'm able to do is facilitate breathwork experiences for people, but then also I have the kind of gross anatomy background, the physiology background, the chiropractic background, the functional medicine background, and the breathwork facilitator background to kind of pull it all together and speak to it in a unique way. So it's become a passion project for me. And I feel like I can have a positive effect on people of all ages, right? So if we can identify certain things in young children when they're born or early on in life, we can completely change their quality of life by changing the quality of the breath they take. I'm always looking for something that's simple, that's measurable, and creates an instant shift in the way somebody feels and is undeniable. And I feel breath also checks off all of those criteria. When we're working with people with their diet and lifestyles, sometimes it takes a while for them to feel different, right? It might take weeks or months or sometimes even years for people to feel different, but breath, you've experienced it yourself. By using your breath, you can change how you feel. And if you're strategic about it, you can completely change your entire day. Every breath we take is a fork in the road to choose how we want to feel. And it's an active system that's online basically 24/7 for us to access. We're just like literally one thought away from changing the way we breathe, which changes the way we feel and function.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of this.
Oh, absolutely. It's my absolute honor and pleasure, and literally we're just kind of scratching the surface of the surface. What I tell people is I'm not an expert, I'm a forever student. And so I'm still learning. And as I learn new things, I'll keep sharing new things. But what I've uncovered so far is that, in combination with a few other things that we can do for our health, breath is one of those things that has a profound measurable shift. It's something everyone can do. We already have the apparatus. You don't have to buy anything. You just have to know how to use it. And so when we give people that instruction manual, they feel better sometimes within minutes, sometimes within the same day, or 90 minutes if they go through a guided breathwork experience. And sometimes people feel different the next day when they wake up because they mouth taped for the first time. I mean, the testimonials that we get from people are mind blowing, and that's, no pun intended, but it's crazy because in the past I would have had to give, or I would have went down the supplement rabbit hole and given somebody all kinds of different adaptogens and support products and all these things. But if our breath is essentially a pharmacy, if our diaphragm is a pharmacy, why not tap into that first and see where we can go? Because even if I give somebody the most perfect supplement products that addresses all of their needs, if their breathing is dysfunctional, and which means their nervous system is dysfunctional, they're going to use those nutrients differently when they're in a fight or flight state versus in a rest and repair state.
Yes, I could not say that better. Yes, I completely agree. I did want to ask you, so if anybody is interested in the guide that you mentioned or doing one of these guided breathwork sessions, where can they learn more about that with you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So they can go to breathworkwithsachin.com, and it's a free opt-in. So breath has become my passion project. And every penny I've earned, I've donated to our hospital. And so we basically pay it forward. And so this is an absolutely free tool, and I plan on keeping it that way. But in there, you'll find very valuable information. So if you're a clinician, I share my PowerPoint with you and a keynote that I've given that you can watch that I know you'll find really valuable and insightful. I also have a guide that I've created from my notes from James Nestor's retreat in Costa Rica. I've got a Breathe Like This, Not That guide, which teaches you how to breathe in different circumstances. I've got a fully guided meditation practice that I'll take you through. And I also have a stop snoring guide. So if you or someone you know is snoring, then I give you the tools to eliminate snoring and how to measure it, and then what exercises to do and the exact protocol to eliminate it, usually within 7 days for most people. If it's going to be something that they work on consistently, they're going to see a significant improvement. So there's an app that they can measure their snoring score with that I share in that guide. And so they can measure their progress over time and see how much better it's getting. So that's all in there because all I want to do is help people breathe better, because when we're breathing better and with awareness, we become a better version of ourselves. So it literally, we can change the world by changing the way people breathe.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And I'll be sure to link that in the show notes for the listeners so that they can grab that. But thank you so much for being here today. This has been such a pleasure and this has been an awesome conversation. We could go on and on, but I know that we have just touched the surface and so many people are listening, probably just so overwhelmed and amazed by all of this, just like me. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's an absolute honor.
Thank you for being a part of my journey on What the Gut podcast. For a deeper dive into today's topics, head over to allisonandwellness.com/whatthegut or find the detailed show notes linked below. Hey, and don't miss out on future episodes. Hit that subscribe button, and if you love this one, please leave me a review. Let's keep the conversation going over on Instagram. Connect with me and stay updated and engaged with my awesome community. Plus, share these valuable insights with your tribe. They deserve to feel as amazing as you do. You can find me at Allison_and_wellness on Instagram. Your support means the world to me. I'm looking forward to our next awesome chat. But until then, stay curious, don't drink too much coffee, keep the vibrant energy flowing, and take care of your gut. Catch you real soon. Oh, and hey, if you're ready to dive deeper into personalized wellness, check out my one-on-one health coaching program at AllisonandWellness.com. Let's make your journey to holistic health truly transformative.